Say hello to my little friend. It feels like I've spent hours measuring. They say measure, measure, cut, but this is going to be measure, 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 have self-doubts, do more measuring, and finally cut. The construction of this bridge is, let's say, different to the way you'd normally do a bridge. Apart from the shape, which is clearly very different, fleur-de-lis arms. Usually when you make a bridge, you construct the bridge, you put the saddle slot in, you get the holes in it first, I guess. Although I think that's optional, you could put the holes in after you've got it positioned and glued to the top of the guitar. But you have the luxury of being able to construct the bridge and then work out where to put it on the top of the guitar after you've finished making it. I don't have that luxury. I have to make this bridge a very specific shape to cover the tear out marks, and I have to have the saddle in precisely the right location. So having routed out the saddle hole on the bridge, I now have to construct the bridge around that saddle. Now I'm gonna drill some holes as the next stage. I'm happy that I've got all the holes in the right place, and I'm going to have locating pins sticking out the bottom of the bridge so the whole thing just slots onto the top. What I'm not so happy about is my bridge design. I've realised that I've got the arms a little bit too big. The way I did this was I took a photograph of the top of the bridge, and then in Photoshop I drew out a bridge around it. Now I had some scaling issues when I printed it, and maybe this is why the bridge has come out a little bit too big. I really need these arms to just come in a little bit and move back slightly. So I think I'm going to go back to the drawing board with the bridge and come up with another design. But this is good enough at the moment to get the width of the bridge done and put the holes in it. I've chalked in some lines on the bridge blank. Because if you remember, I twisted the whole blank to get the slot parallel with the sides to make it easier to route, and now I'm going to twist the whole bridge back again to be parallel to the grain. So I can do that and drill it, but I will have to redesign the bridge, make the arms a little bit daintier, which I'm a little bit worried about because there's going to be some very thin wood here. It's going to be very easy to break it. This is rosewood, so it's quite hard. Yeah. Maybe I'm just scaring myself. Maybe I should just go blindly ahead. But I need to get this in the right place. I think another reason the arms might be a little bit on the large size is I was really trying two things. I was trying to get the whole thing symmetrical and geometric, which is easy to do when you're using a drawing program. But the original wasn't like that. The original was clearly handmade, hand-drawn, and there are some differences between the two sides. I've still managed to get the arms a little bit too far forward. I don't know how that happened, but we'll go back to Photoshop and do a bridge mark 3, I think it is. So, I think I'm ready to get this sawn to thickness and planed, and then we'll get some holes drawn in it. The holes, by the way, I think traditionally these holes are 3/16 of an inch, which is 4.8 millimeters, and it's quite important to get the width right because of the bridge pin. And I don't actually have the bridge pin to hand, but you really want to have the holes, the width of the bridge pin about that far from the top of the bridge pin, and then you can just ream out the last little bit just to get the bridge pin sitting properly. I don't think it's necessary to have the whole of the bridge hole reamed, because then you probably get your bridge pins stuck. But the bridge hole will, I think, be straight at the bottom and then just flare slightly with the reamer, and then the bridge will sort of seat in nicely without getting stuck all the time. What else can I say? The problem of the locating pins, I've got to put some holes underneath the bridge, and I've only got 6mm to work with, so I've got to be very careful that I go in deep enough to seat the pins, which I'm going to make out of rosewood. They're going to be little dowels, but I don't want any drill point going through the top of the bridge. So I'm going to try using an end mill to drill the holes, and I'm going to drill them just 3mm deep, which may interfere with the saddle slot, but I think I'm okay with that. If it does intrude into the saddle slot at all, I can just get a little chisel in. I've got a very, very fine inlay chisel, and I can just take the pin down if it's intruding into the saddle slot. But clearly what I don't want to do is have the locating pin coming right through the top of the bridge, so I need to be a little bit careful, make sure my pillar drill is set properly for that. I'm going to use the pillar drill for the holes, make sure they're nice and vertical and true and regularly spaced. So let's do it. I will make the dowel out of that. Even this tiny amount of dust that's coming up, I'm wondering whether I should be wearing a mask. It has a very distinctive taste. I'm surprised I can taste it, but it's clearly getting up into my mouth and my nose. Need to have it clamped here. This new bench, actually, it's not very easy for clamping things, although I would find it hard to clamp here anyway, but because there's an edge to the bench, it's difficult to get a clamp underneath. The top's only 15mm thick. Ooh. Something just... I wonder what that was that just went crack. I'm very aware that I went very close to the line, so I don't want to take much off in the planing. This is a newly sharpened blade. It'll take a while to get the thing. Thought I'd got it. Thought I got more blade showing than that, but anyway, nope. Oh dear. Nope. Oh, we're getting there. For some reason I didn't think that was straight, but it is. What I didn't mention earlier is I've got a 3mm slope on this bridge, so well, 3mm across the width of the string. So if I measure about there, that's 8mm, and if I measure about there, that's 11mm, possibly a bit more. Yeah. I measure the ends. I've got 7mm and 12mm, but the strings are going to be about there. Now I'm measuring everything relative to the slot, but it happens that I have got the sides properly parallel, which is always helpful. So with the aid of my light, I've cut a few little slits across the slot at the ends, so I can see that I've got it nicely lined up, and across the middle, so that, oh, I think I've just, oh no, I didn't move the paper, I just moved the bridge. That's still nicely lined up. So I've got my, I did it again, this bridge is sliding around. So I've got the line straight down the middle of the slot. Checking. And with a very sharp awl, I really need to get myself some magnifying headset. I'll just redo those. That's it. And then the underside holes I can take from the position of these. There we go. I just did a test hole in another piece of rosewood, and that's the result. What we have there is the bridge pin goes into the depth of our bridge, which means that when I ream that out, the reaming will only be inside the bridge, it won't be through the surface of the guitar, so the hole through the guitar will be straight. I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but that seems to be in line with any advice I've managed to glean, but I'm quite happy with that. There was a little bit of tear out on the second hole. The first hole drilled quite neatly, the second hole not so, but we haven't yet planed the top of this bridge, so if there is a tiny little bit of tear out, it should clean up when I dress the surface of the bridge. Me a little that it feels like it's pulling to the side as it goes through. I don't know why it's doing that, but it seems to be going okay. Those are regularly spaced holes. goes again, moving. That's actually fine. I just nicked the edge as it went in, but as we haven't planed the top yet, I think that's fine. There's probably 0.5 millimetre to take off this top. It's a shame. I don't think this is the sharpest brad point bit I could get, really. I had trouble finding one. This is actually second hand. It had been sharpened, but I think it's lost a couple of the, well, not a couple, I think it's lost one of the little lips, so I don't think it's producing the cleanest of holes on top. But as I say, at least I've got to plane the top yet, so I think that's okay. So now we've got to mill the locating pins. Okay, I've measured and measured and marked and marked and marked and marked, and I've put some square boxes on here because I've got bradawl marks here, but because this is an end mill, there's no point that I can locate, so I'm just going to have a visual guide that I'm within the middle of that box. As far as depth goes, I think I've got that sussed. This wood's 4 millimeters thick, and I'm drilling a 1 millimeter hole very neatly. There's a bit of tear out, but the bottom of it is very neat, very square, so I'm getting sort of maximum hole for the available depth, so I'm quite happy with that. And the distance of it from the back seems to line up quite nicely. Let's draw another one just there, so I'll show that. So that's lining up quite nicely, although, well, actually, having said that, that looks like it's a little bit too far forward. Did I have... oh dear. Yeah, it is actually. But that certainly doesn't look like it's too far forward. Yeah, strange. I wonder what's going on here. There's something really horrible about this pillar drill. At the end of its extent, it moves forwards. That's horrible. I wonder whether it's... I think it's to do with this arrangement here, that as you're pressing on it, but that bit is moving. I really don't like that. Oh great. I wonder if there's a better way I can do this. That movement, I think, is what I was feeling with the other work. Why the piece was moving when it got to the bottom of its extent. When I was drilling these holes, as I got to the bottom, everything would suddenly shift, and it's because of movement in the column and some sort of torque between this depth gauge, which I've got loose incidentally, and this. It's just pulling because of the play in the well, it's not a bearing, but the whatever is supporting the column. Oh, I really don't like that. Okay, I've had a think, and I've decided that this is a visual guide only. What I mustn't do is press the handle when the bolt hits the metalwork, because all it does is twist the bit. So I've got to watch this carefully, and as it gets to the top of that, that's as far as I go. So on that basis, what I now have, let me drill another hole. gives us a hole which matches up quite nicely with where we want the hole on the work. Right, and it will only go to within 3mm of the deck. Let me hope that that is a deep enough hole. It should be. So I want to get this centered. It looks okay. The head of the bit is moving around a fair bit, forgive the pun. It is very difficult to get this lined up. But that looks good. In case you're wondering, that hole is meant to be slightly in from this hole here. The holes on the front weren't quite where they should have been due to being hand drilled. So that's almost a millimetre that way, and hopefully those two line up. Maybe they don't. Right. We've done it. So now we need some dowel. Say hello to my little friend. Mini plane. Fiddly work. It's a useful tool. Don't know whether this would be considered plane abuse, but let's give it a go. Still got some angles, but there's a very nice curve on the front there, so I suspect the back is recessed, and that's the proud part getting taken off. But certainly coming together. The shavings from this are almost like candy floss. Wonder how far I can go with this. Oh, that's feeling better. Yeah. I think it's still way too big, but we're getting something round. That's 6mm. Got to take it down 1.5 millimeters. I went back to using the file because I realised that using a plane, you're limited to a depth of cut because the edge of the sole of the plane is going to be bearing against the top here, and I was getting a lip just here, and I wasn't going any further. That is now feeling really nice and smooth and round. So yeah, this is a good way to do it. We're getting there. It's proving difficult to get a consistent diameter. It's thinner in the middle than down there or up the top, so I guess I've just got to play it by eye and just try to concentrate more on there and then steer clear of the middle, I guess. And what you wood turners out there think of this. We're getting a little bit more consistent. Looks like we're there. Two locating pins, which I mustn't now lose. I've got to put those in a bag or something. Just need to ream this hole out a little bit to take the pin. This doesn't need much reaming. This is the reamer I'll be using to ream out bridge pin holes. There we go. Measurement. Certainly looking fairly good. Let's see what happens when I put the pins in the holes. Oh, joy. Right, we now have a bridge. And from memory, I think we're 629 scale length. So we are 630 at the centre of the slot there, which is perfect, and we should be 633 at the centre of the slot there, which we are. Phew, there we go. We have a perfectly centred bridge, and due to the tolerances to which I've been working, that's already nicely. Oh yes, I am very happy. Phew. I've got that to within the whisker. That's exactly where I want it. Not even half a millimetre in it. I think it's closer than that. Yay!